We have a massive Milwaukee Bucks trade update to go over today as things keep getting crazier for the Milwaukee Bucks as they are now linked to Zach LaVine. And what's going to be a crazy next few days surrounding Jimmy Butler getting traded to the Suns from the Heat. The Bucks are linked now to multiple different avenues towards this trade, whether that be Bradley Beal, whether that be Zach LaVine, and more. So stay tuned for all that in this episode, folks. But before we get into it, if you're a part of the percentage you aren't subscribed to the channel, it's the place to be for daily Bucks content, uploading multiple times a day, especially as the trade deadline approaches. Thank you guys for your continued support. You guys have been unbelievable. And I made a video earlier today on the Bradley Beal situation. It keeps getting crazier as now the Zach LaVine situation has started to pick up. And this one has Bucks fans a lot more interested than the initial Bradley Beal and, the initial report that came out regarding Bradley Beal. Now, Zach LaVine is a much different player. He's a much better player, and he could fit this team really well. So you can see this here. The Bulls could emerge as a team that's just dropped, involved in the Jimmy Butler trade. Bradley Beal to the Bucks, a very realistic option on the table, but so is reuniting with his former college coach, Billy Donovan. Zach LaVine in this deal would go to Milwaukee, while Chicago nets Beal and draft capital. So this one's interesting. Now, in all the trades we were talking about with the Bucks, with Bradley Beal, the Bucks weren't getting any assets back. They were trading away Chris Middleton and some guys, and they weren't getting assets to, receive Beal. Now, if the Milwaukee Bucks do go that route and they don't receive any assets to, get Beal, I'm not entirely sure it fits well for the Bucks. Now, if this is a route they're going to go surrounding Zach LaVine, things are very interesting here because we'll dive into some potential trades. There's a mock trade. There's a bunch of different things that are, trade reports right now are absolutely crazy. But when you start to think about Zach LaVine rather than Bradley Beal, I like it a lot more. Now, things start to get extremely interesting with this deal. Now, let's dive into Bradley Beal stats a little bit. Zach LaVine stats a little bit. We obviously covered Beal earlier today. Now, regarding Bradley, Beal versus Zach LaVine. Zach LaVine here, he's averaging 24 points a game, 45% from three, 51% from the field. It is night and day, the difference between Beal and LaVine. LaVine is an elite creator. He's having one of the, if not the best season of his career, especially efficiency-wise. He is a lights-out shooter. And if the Bucks were able to acquire him without giving up too much capital, man, oh man, it could make some sense. Now, there was a time where, teams wouldn't trade a first-round pick for him last year because he was having such a down year. Now, depending on what the Bulls want, things could really start to get interesting here. Now, specifically regarding, Zach LaVine's fit. We'll dive into that, of course. But Bucks fans are a lot more open to Zach LaVine than they are Bradley Beal. And I am as well, simply because you think about the risk of Bradley Beal. He's making $50 million a year to be basically what Chris Middleton is, maybe a little bit better in some ways, definitely worse in other ways with less, chemistry with the team. Now, when you're thinking about it from the perspective of the Milwaukee Bucks here, and Giannis especially, like getting Zach LaVine, your defense is bad, but if you have a starting lineup of Damian Lillard, Zach LaVine, Taurean Prince, Giannis, and Brook, that is one of the most elite offensive lineups that there is in the NBA. You have a crazy, 1-2 punch there. And really, you'd also be able to stagger the bench unit a bit more, maybe give some more rest to Dame and Zach LaVine, split them up between the bench. And you wouldn't necessarily have to go out and get a huge bench piece because you can obviously stagger them a bit. But, Zach LaVine here would be a good fit. That being said, though, his defense is a problem. He's a very poor defender. And what that means, basically, is that they are in trouble if teams start to try to expose that. But again, that's an interesting conversation to have. And again, regarding Bradley Beal, right? Like people's thoughts on Bradley Beal, they're fine getting Butler. They're fine not getting Butler. But if you get Beal, it's really bad. And some people say, it's super interesting because this dropped, right? And fans now are of the mindset of either, okay, because the Bucks are going to be involved in the Jimmy Butler trade somehow, it seems like. Whether that be Bradley Beal or in a 4-team deal with the Bulls in order to acquire Zach LaVine. I prefer the Zach LaVine route heavily. I think it is a much better route, is a much safer route, and just makes a lot more sense for this Milwaukee Bucks team. Now, do I think he's a seamless fit? No. I think they should really be going for someone a bit more defensively reliable. That being said, there isn't many of those out there, especially with the picks that the Bucks have. They only have their 2031 first and second. And if you're able to get a star with only those two picks, I don't even think you'd have to give up necessarily your first round pick for Zach LaVine. You might. And I'll ask you guys, would you give up your 2031 first for Zach LaVine? That's a question I'll ask. And fans are a bit split on it. We're going to dive into a trade here in a minute. But again, there was also some buzz about the Bradley Beal situation, like I mentioned in the video earlier, where you're giving up Chris Middleton. Now, you'd still have to give up Chris Middleton in any deal. So you'd basically be replacing Chris Middleton with Zach LaVine. And LaVine at this point of his career is much better. But some fans are saying, I'll be willing to part with Middleton for Butler or even LaVine, but not Beal. Fireable fence. I covered in the video earlier, and I mentioned this tweet in the earlier video. It makes more sense. Like, if you give up Middleton for Zach LaVine, you're at least seeing a tangible upgrade. Is it in the way that the Bucks need? That's not necessarily the case. But what is the case is that the Milwaukee Bucks would be a better team with Zach LaVine. At least a better offensive team. Do they need offense? There is still times where they do. Like, their bench right now is really not great. You have Chris Middleton, you have Gary Trent Jr., you have AJ Green. They need to make some more additions. And I think Bobby Portis will probably be out. You're trying to get one more backup big man. There's a lot of different things here, but things are really starting to pick up. And I want to point out this trade here. And this is one surrounding Bradley Beal. And it's interesting. We'll be covering this again in the future, but it's essentially Middleton, Portis, Pat Connaughton, and the Bucks receive Beal in a first. Now, I don't even think Dunn can be traded technically, but again, this would be this is just for the sake of conversation. If you're getting a first back while acquiring Bradley Beal, I am a lot more for it than if you don't get anything back. Because again, you're acquiring a bad salary of $50 million a year. If you get Bradley Beal and a pick, sure, go ahead and do that. You could even then be more willing to flip your 2031 first-round pick because you have a 2025 pick back, even though it's a lot less valuable. You can do that. You can flip the pick for future assets, all these different things. If you're getting a pick back for Bradley Beal, it changes the question entirely. Now, if you're not getting a pick back for Bradley Beal, then I think you pursue the Zach LaVine situation, and that's kind of the standstill I'm at right now. LaVine is a great player. He would fit fairly well offensively with the Bucks. You wouldn't have to give up a lot for him. Regarding Bradley Beal, if you're getting a pick back for Bradley Beal, sure. I mean, then you trade Middleton, Portis, and Pat Connaughton for a first and Bradley Beal. You're basically banking on an upgrade over Chris Middleton. You're losing Bobby Portis, and you're getting rid of Pat Connaughton's salary. And, it's very interesting. You can see this here as well. You can see the picks down below. None of these are the Bucks picks. Of course, they only have the 2031 and 20 your first and second. So they're not giving up any picks here. They're acquiring a first just in case, that wasn't clear. I mean, I wouldn't hate this. This would be good asset management, I think. Now, is Beal's contract good? Not necessarily. I mean, it's bad at $50 million. Is Zach LaVine's contract good? I mean, you think about last year, people were at the deadline were saying that they wouldn't, take on the contract if they got paid for it. But now he's playing so well that it's like, man, may as well. If you're a team like the Bucks who don't have a ton of assets and you're able to kind of maneuver your way, finagle your way into a deal here, it could make some sense for the Bucks. I really think it could make some sense for the Bucks, but I want you to let me know down below what your thoughts are on this. I think ultimately it's going to be tough. I think Beal is probably more likely where they acquire a pick back. I wouldn't give up, and I wouldn't do a swap straight up for Middleton or Beal because I think what they have right now, I mean, the Bucks are playing fairly good basketball. They need to make some upgrades. Bobby Portis is still a guy that needs to be, discussed when it comes to being traded. Their bench needs some work. Ryan Rollins started to play well. It opens up some spots there. But let me know down below what your thoughts are. And would you do a Zach LaVine deal centered around Chris Middleton? Let me know down below. And again, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be crazy. And we're going to keep you up to date with all the latest Bucks news. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thank you guys for watching. Cheers.